Welcome to Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. Our podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? What can we learn from them? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Well, welcome back and welcome to another fascinating episode of Perusing's The Power of Values. Once again, another just engaging and just a good-natured guest with a fantastic story to share with us today. I want to thank Paul Rayburn for being with us. Paul, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm honored, considering the cast of characters that you've had on. So I appreciate it.
Amongst many things, there's a lot of unique stuff you'll get to learn about Paul along the way. But before we even jump in, remember that the power of the media comes down to you. So please make sure to whatever medium you're listening to this on, be it Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or maybe it's even YouTube these days, please make sure to like the podcast and be generous and share it out, because a couple conversations, even this past week, all about the power of community. And I was really grateful to hear another particular group of peers. We're finding a lot of value out of this and sending it out. Just it's all about we learn because of the generosity of others to let us know what the future might hold for us, given what they've already done and accomplished. So feel free to add some comments as well. So, Paul, we would love to hear, buddy, were you born this way, or how did you get into the valuation and appraisal profession?
Okay, well, I don't exactly know how to answer that question. I don't think I was born this way. But I knew you were going to ask this question.
Thank goodness it hasn't changed season after season after season.
I catch on really quick, right? So you're not going to pull one over on me. I don't think I was born this way. I don't have any family that were, my family hadn't generally grown up in real estate. I did get involved in this through a family member, so that'll probably come up as we go through the chat here. But I was thinking about it. It was early grade school, like, I don't know, grade 9, 10, somewhere. They give you the aptitude test. You took one of those. I remember my top rank score came up as a private investigator.
Private investigator. This is fascinating. I don't think people know about what you're speaking to. So what is the assessment that you took?
Well, I mean, it's like when you're in, I think it was grade 9 or 10, somewhere in there, you start to talk about, they're starting to prepare you to start thinking about getting jobs and that kind of stuff and what you might want to do for a career. So they give you an aptitude test.
Yes.
So they'll ask a bunch of questions about, this was whatever, 20, almost 30 years ago. So, but it came up as this private investigator, and, being a, whatever it was, 14, 15-year-old at that time, I thought, well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm an investigator, right? But I never pursued that, it didn't become a part of my journey, my career path.
Yes.
But that popped into my mind when you asked that question, was I born this way? Because, being a real estate appraiser, I mean, investigation is what we do. I mean, it's highly investigative. So
yes,
maybe I was born this way.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. So here you get to take this kind of assessment, kind of aptitude that has given you natural abilities. What are you more predisposed towards being either good at and or find interesting? And so at that point, did you start watching a bunch of Sherlock Holmes movies, or what happened?
No, I went about being a rowdy teenager, chasing the girls and dirt biking and hooting and hollering and, having a real good time. So, yeah, no, I did not specifically start pursuing this new identity of Sherlock Holmes. That took place many years later, or maybe it was going on all along in the background, but yeah.
Wow. So you go through, you take the assessment, you do some schooling, you end up staying in school, or did you find that wasn't for you and blew out, or what?
Well, funny you should ask that question. Yeah, so my dad kicked me out of the house when I was 17.
Yep.
Sent me up north to work in the oil patch. Did that for, a season or so. my friends really enjoyed that because I was making really good money. Come back, and we were mostly living in camps.
Yes.
Come back to town with fistfuls of cash and have a good time.
That's a good friend to have.
Yeah, exactly. A real good friend. I remember one story. A friend of mine, I left my keys for my car. It was an old, 70-something Le Mans, this great big boat. And I come back one time from my stint out in the bush, and like, buddy, where's my car? Well, it's up in the bush, and he shows me a picture of it with a beer box taped onto the hood, and a kokanee. So a kokanee was a famous Canadian beer, and so we put a kokanee blower on it, man.
Oh my goodness!
I never saw that car again.
I never saw the car again. Now, Paul, some people may have picked up on two important things so far. First is that you have a distinguished tone to your voice, and that's because you are our first Canadian guest. We would like to welcome you as our first Canadian guest to the podcast.
Hey, cool. I'm glad. Glad to be I could represent. Hope I represent well. I'm probably not off to a good start with my stories of partying and dropping out of school.
Paul, I would actually say you're off to a great start because, what people love the most are life stories. They don't need people talking at them. They like people talking to them and with them. So you're doing great so far. And then second, you talked about the experience, which was quite common. And you might want to give people a little sense. Sometimes those of us north of Mexico, but south of the Canadian border have no idea where Canada is. And I don't mean that literally, but I mean, like, where in Canada are you? Kind of central, eastern, west, and obviously reference to oil fields for those of us who know Canada well. But other people might have no sense of where you're at.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I'm in the Okanagan, which is north of Washington, so west coast area generally. Yeah, we're sort of in the interior. It's about a 4 or 5 hour drive to Vancouver.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a beautiful area, tourist destination, but just outside of Kelowna, which is the fastest growing city in Canada, and the whole region, the whole central Okanagan region is also the fastest growing region. For the last couple of years here, they've been winning that title, so it's an interesting place.
Yeah, no. I definitely appreciate that. For the geographically challenged, basically think of Seattle and Spokane, if you know where that's at, and basically kind of split the difference between the two and go due north, cross the border for a while. Then you're obviously due east, a little bit north and east of Vancouver. So if you're a skier and you're kind of the Whistler kind of person, what have you, you're in the vicinity, if you will, in terms of the area of Canada. So, Paul, thanks for the geographic education there, geographic competency, as we like to say.
Yeah, right.
So you never see the Le Mans again. What happens next in life?
Well, let's see here. So my father was in the boat business pretty much all of his life. Yeah. So we sort of patched things up a little bit, and he had started up a boat business. I mean, I had worked for him part-time, whatnot, as I was going through school. We had a small boat store in Kelowna. Yes. And then he had an opportunity to go down to the coast and start up a boat dealership down there. Oh, wow. It was, so for folks that are from the Seattle area, that was, when it started, it was Pace Marine, but shortly thereafter, it became Olympic Boat Centers, which was the largest bayliner dealer in the U.S., and also then we became the largest bayliner dealer in Canada. So I had this, went down and started working for him in the boat business, and it was quite the adventure. I think he fired me once. I don't think I got fired twice. I don't think I got that opportunity. So we had an interesting relationship, but I learned a lot, and it was an incredibly interesting career that eventually led to becoming a yacht builder. So he had an opportunity to take over by a yacht builder just outside of Vancouver. It was called FC yachts, which were Forbes Cooper yachts, and Cooper Yachts was a large boat manufacturer and fairly popular builder in that area.
Got it.
And, they were building boats to, from about 40 to about 70 feet at the time. Typical, This was in the, let's see here, that would have been in the early 90s,
yes.
Mid 90s era. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, mid to late 90s, actually. And, around that time, we're going to talk a lot about boats here. I'm sorry. So if you
I think that's actually helpful because people, what makes this so fascinating is that, valuation and appraisal is a part of it, but there's so much more to people's lives than that. And clearly, you being in the boat industry and custom boats, I mean, there's going to be some people on here that are just tickled pink that we get into such a precious category. Other people are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So more power to
boats. And for those that hate boats, I hate boats too now. So we'll get to that later.
I hate boats too.
So at that time, we were starting to deal with some competition because our client base was, generally sort of international. In fact, almost worldwide. The company had built boats for people from New Zealand.
Wow,
lots of American buyers, France, So the point is that our client base was international, and so was our competition, right? And so around that time, that Taiwan boat builders were really taking a big chunk of the market. They were starting to build pretty good stuff. And later on in the business, China started getting into boat building.
Oh, really?
So the point was, the competition was fierce, especially for a fairly small, company trying to get established in that world market. So looking at this, my dad and the company decided that we needed to be, setting ourselves apart. We couldn't compete on labor cost. We had, Canada was generally in that time was fairly competitive.
Sure.
The dollar was reasonably competitive. So but it fluctuated a lot, which further also complicated things but anyway, so we started focusing on, that we need to become, our motto was we want to become the Rolls Royce of yacht builders. So we were trying to build a reputation of building the very best custom yachts in our size class. And we were at around that time, that was in now we're getting into the early 2000s. And we were sort of getting into the 80 to 90 foot range. And so, we had a client who was sort of a repeat customer. He was a GM dealer in Vancouver area. Mm-hmm. And he sort of, would build, a lot of our customers were basically would build them kind of spec. They build a boat, use it, put it on the market, take it to a boat show, see if they could make a buck on it, right? Because they had the cash.
Sure.
We didn't have the cash. We were just
we
couldn't afford to own what we built. My dad would always say, So
I think appraisers sometimes feel that way too. I don't think you're alone there, Paul.
Well, I've appraised a lot of stuff that I couldn't even afford to, resurface the driveway. But anyways, so we start building these, higher quality homes that are built yachts. And that attracted one of our next clients was a fellow that sold his custom high-end stationery business to Hallmark.
Wow.
He was from Kennebunkport, Maine.
Okay.
His dream was to, sail across the Atlantic and tour the Mediterranean. And one of his design models, his builders that we sort of had to build to the standard of was burger yachts. So
sure.
They're up there in how do you say it? Manitowoc, Wisconsin, over there.
Yeah, hold on a second. Yeah, I actually know that, and I totally just spaced. Yeah, I'll come to me.
Yeah. So and a couple other builders that you would often, that's how we would come to an agreement. We would decide, look at what other builders, and sometimes we'd go to boat shows with these these fellows or, tour other boats and look around at the quality and features and the fit and the finish and sort of write that into our contract.
Sure.
That this was the standard that we would build to. So that, that was quite the process, right? Like, and that's one thing that crosses over to me with appraisal is, when I look at a builder's contract, looking at new construction stuff, is how did the buyer and the builder arrive for custom stuff, right? How did they arrive at the value? A lot of them are cost plus, but some of them are, occasionally you see them fixed price,
sure.
Or you see them with, base price with allowances. It can be formulated a number of ways. So I could be talking about yachts, or I could be talking about homes at this point in time. So, that's one thing I always try and focus on when I'm doing new construction is understanding, what was the baseline for the agreement between the buyer and the builder. And it's one of the things odd that frequently, people are, why are you asking it? I don't normally get asked these kinds of questions. Just here's what we're building. Here's the price.
Sure.
You agree or you don't agree, Mr. Appraiser.
Wow. Love that.
So anyway, so I think that part of the baseline and being a builder and establishing that was extremely important, right? Especially if we were quite often doing fixed price contracts.
Got it.
On these totally custom yachts, which, is not an ideal model. Ideally, a builder, in a good place should be able to get themselves to, not be doing fixed prices on unique construction.
Oh, absolutely.
If you know what it's going to cost you, well, then it's probably not actually unique, So,
yes.
or you're building in a lot of profit, a lot of, margin in there, which maybe has you not competitive. So it's a balance, right? So we build these boats and they continually keep getting better and better. The quality goes up and up. I start getting more involved in the design side. So, again, this is the early 2000s.
Sure.
A lot of the stuff we had done in construction was just done on, printed plans. Maybe some of the naval architects, engineers, and whatnot were using computer programs.
Sure.
But we had to sort of modernize, and my dad was reluctant, but we had a few guys on the crew that were like, hey, it'd be great to have somebody on staff that could help make some shop drawings, to improve some efficiency. We're dealing with these paper drawings. We're trying to custom fit stuff on site, and we're building it bit by bit, and it makes it tough to sort of pre-build components.
Of course,
that will fit.
Yes.
So through that relationship, I had a fellow that came on that was that we brought on who was he came from another builder, but he was a sort of an expert in AutoCAD. I think his was MicroStation. So
got it.
I had to come in early before my dad got there, to practice with this guy. So I started. He's like, Paul, you come in, we'll set you up there. I'll load the program on, and you can start practicing and learning how to use AutoCAD.
Oh, okay.
My dad was like, you don't need to be playing with those computers, do this and do that. He saw it as some kind of a toy, he hated computers. He first coined the term that, customers would always laugh, what kind of boat do you have, Ron? Well, and he was, we did have boats. So it's not like he knew nothing about boats, but, they'd expect that he'd have some, 90-foot yacht at the yacht club. But I hate boats. So
that's funny.
I'm buying a multi-million-dollar yacht off you, and you hate boats. He usually would tell them that after they signed the contract.
Oh, that's even more enticing. Goodness gracious! So how did the boat business go for you guys?
Well, it was good for a while until it wasn't. So,
I see.
The financial crisis of 2007,
yes, sir.
Melted the yacht industry pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, it just dissolved. So we had at that time a 90-foot under construction. That was for some folks from Chicago, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, they were deciding between Hatteras and Rayburn yachts. So
Nice.
So they went with us. And anyways, and then we had signed a contract to build a 100-footer.
Wow.
So, and this customer had come to us, had seen the 90-footer pretty much nearing completion.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, yeah, we already had a 100-footer under construction for him.
Oh, I see.
And he said, look, I want to book up your next production slot. This was in about 2005.
Got it.
So we've got this 90-footer ready to launch. We've got the 100-footer for this guy well underway. And he says, okay, your work just keeps getting better and better and better. I'm in. I want to build another one with you guys. So we signed a contract for a 100-footer. Or sorry, 100. That was 107. That second one. And yeah. So then the meltdown happened.
No, absolutely.
And so we had, this was 2006, 2007. We had his 100-footer pretty much nearing completion, and then he started getting cold feet and just kind of stopped paying.
Kind of stop paying. There's no kind of stop paying. You're either paying or you're not, Paul. Anyone who's been around business long enough knows there's like a little bit of a delay, and then there's just you're not paying.
Yeah. So that was the beginning of a very difficult time. We arbitrated that out and won. Well, the lawyers won.
Yeah. That is the truth on that.
But so I mean, I could go back and some other relationships, relevance between what we're doing now as appraisers and what sort of drives me, what makes Paul tick, I guess. There was sort of in that transition period, if we could bounce around a little bit in time here and go back to the 90s,
sure,
to the late 90s, when my dad was taking over the company, there was a local sort of government initiative to help try and support the yacht building trade. The British Columbia area, the Vancouver area was commonly a popular, yacht building was a long-standing tradition there. And there was, some well sought after established builders. But, there was this initiative that we're trying to help builders, sort of get on the world stage. And so there's two main boat shows. So there's the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show that goes on in October.
And that's an amazing boat show. I've actually been to that boat show.
Yeah. I haven't been in a few years, but it is absolutely insane. And then there's one in Miami. So the Fort Lauderdale and the Miami boat shows are two of the biggest boat shows in the world, and definitely for the large yachts.
Yes.
Focus on large yachts. But the Fort Lauderdale. So, to get a space in those boat shows, they either in the booth or a slip, for a lot of builders, small custom builders, getting a boat in a show is difficult because, you sort of build these things and then they're done and the customers take them.
Yes.
And you don't get it really other than through photos. You don't really get always an opportunity to show. So that's why the Fort Lauderdale, they have these massive tents with huge displays, but getting a space in there was very, very difficult. So even though there was a lot of rivalry between builders in that area, but often over trades, poaching of trades was a common issue. Skilled labor, difficulties with skilled labor going back in the 90s.
I know similarities there between yacht building and, building real estate, huh?
Yeah, skilled labor. But, I think, so the idea was, there's a kind of a new generation coming on, like myself, one of the grandsons of a builder called Crescent Yachts.
Sure.
Which was probably the biggest, and actually they're the only one that really sort of survived in any significant way this downturn. They're still going today, and kudos to them. Certainly they had some deep pockets to survive it and find ways to get around it. But the grandson, Tim Charles, was one of the fellows, myself and a few other guys that sort of jumped on this idea to, form this British Columbia Yacht Builders Association.
Oh, okay.
So, I jumped on board because, the concept was we could either we're all fighting over the same customers, but we're fighting over them worldwide. And these buyers can go anywhere in the world to get their yachts built. And so the idea was that if we could at least get them to the Vancouver area,
yes,
then we all stood a better chance.
Absolutely. We
all stood a better chance of surviving, of having more access to clients, to customers. So that concept of an association, became very valuable. In fact, so that allowed us to pool our resources to get a booth in the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show, and we all sort of displayed in this booth. And year over year, we just kept getting more space and building our booth.
Great.
And building our presence, and we, so it went on for, up till about the time of the financial crisis. That was about the end for that. And then, and I don't know how that all rolled out because I eventually moved on. But
so when you moved on, how did that transition from the boating industry come about to your next form of employment?
Yeah, so I sort of like so we had another contract after that 2007-8 period. We arbitrated that out, and coming around 2011, 10 or 11, we had another builder who had also gone out of business, bankruptcy. That was Northern Marine in Washington.
Yes,
and they had hired they were bigger than us. They were building like 80 to 140 foot yachts, bigger. And they had several projects on the go when they went bankrupt. And the owners all pooled their resources, basically formed new co to finish building their yachts.
Sure.
And they hired the prior owner on a management contract. So he had a non-compete clause, and he had another customer that wanted to build a new boat. And we had a surveyor that was a guy that, a surveyor, like a, home inspector.
Oh, sure.
Somewhere between a surveyor, home inspector, and appraiser. Sort of did both for the marine side, and a marine surveyor. He suggested to this fellow, well, Rayburn needs a project, and they're good people, and they build good stuff. And so he brought his customer to us, and we basically built this thing under contract for them. And this is where I learned a little bit about pharma. I had in that phase of building yachts, I had an opportunity to meet a fellow named Ed Hageman, and he was a very well established naval architect.
Yes.
He worked for a company called Nickham and Spalding. They designed Washington State ferries, but he also did work for Ed Monk Jr., which is some of the guys in the areas and boats, they would know Ed Monk Jr. And he was just, we hit it off, and he sort of mentored me in my path, becoming more and more involved in the yacht design side and construction.
Oh, okay.
But, he was, very, I say conservative. He was a professional naval architect, marine engineer.
Yes.
Through and through. And sort of around that mid period between getting these 100-foot yachts signed, we were, needing another contract.
Sure.
And I had a guy come to me, a captain, to build a 84-foot trawler, a trawler style hull that was being, sort of over time transitioned into luxury yachts. So initially it was an offshore fishing vessel hull design, and these builders, which was actually the same guy that brought this other project to us, it was involved in sort of what Ed Hageman called prior art. So you take one design and you modify it, and it works good, and you modify it again, and then it works okay, and you keep stretching this thing, you lengthen it, you stack decks on top, and so as it would turn out, I I looked at this design, and armed with my BS detector, and I shared the design with him too, and he said, "No, walk away, Paul. You need the project. Don't do it." And I was, we needed it. My dad wanted it. We were like, we could do this. We need the project, we need the money, but So as it turns out, they built this thing, and I found out this is after we bellied up, after we shut down the boat business.
Sure.
That on launch, that boat rolled over. It was estimated its value was $10 million when I was around $10 million. It was a beautiful looking, construction. They went all out. They beautiful interior, granite countertops, granite this, and so I guess where does that story lead me, and how does that relate to?
So Paul, real quick, for the non-boating aficionados in the community, what does that mean exactly? I mean, because unfortunately, it is a podcast. I guess fortunately, it's a podcast. Otherwise, we would have a number of potential photos to share and even cringe upon. But what exactly happened when the boat went to launch?
80% of all businesses fail within 5 years, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. With so many roles and responsibilities that must be managed and have nothing to do with appraisal reports, is it any surprise that it's hard to keep up, much less having a sense of peace, stability, and profitability that comes from growing your business? Given all of this, you might already be thinking about exiting your business one day. Don't miss the limited opportunity to work with Michael, a real estate expert and professional coach. He has worked with more than 300 owners and entrepreneurs to find their highest and best use by solving problems that reach their most important goals. Compress decades of learning into days by working with Michael. Michael is famous in real estate and business coaching. With his help, you can accelerate your growth, increase your quality of life, and earn more money, all while ultimately doing less. Michael helps you not just grow your business, but also find new purpose in it and in your life. If you're ready to take control instead of being controlled, contact him on LinkedIn or email him at michaelh@paru.com.
Well, you can look it up. You can search Anacortes, Washington, yacht rolls over on launch. Now, it was a scary situation. It was sad, and I do not wish ill on anybody.
Yeah.
But it sort of cemented into me that sometimes, when something's not right, you go with your gut.
Yeah.
And even though, they had supposed studies and everything that this thing was, they had all the stability, blah, blah, blah. And even on the, the Transportation Safety Board sort of did their study on it and released that it had to do with how it was launched, but I don't know, This thing it looked like a duck, it quacked like a duck, it was probably a duck, anyways. So yeah, you could look that up.
Got it. Fascinating.
So it was, it was karma, and it was reaffirmation that, stick with your morals, I guess, if you something you don't believe to be something you probably shouldn't do. Maybe you shouldn't. So yeah. So as I've alluded to, obviously the boat business didn't work out. 2011, we settled. That fellow that brought that contract to us, that company that was building, hired him with a non-compete. Those owners, their company went bankrupt again.
Oh no!
So his non-compete was no longer valid. I'm telling you, the day after, I had emails from him on, Monday, you guys are doing a great job. You looks great. On Tuesday, the company declared bankruptcy. On Wednesday, you guys are jerks. You fine schedule, know what you're doing. And he convinced his customer with the money to also stop paying. So we had a little powwow, and they posted bond. And they took the boat out and they took it down to Anacortes, Washington. Now that boat was a fully custom new design, and that was a good boat. And that one didn't. I don't want to confuse things here. That one didn't have any issues. So
you end up walking away from this boating business, being in the impact of the great financial crisis, and it hit everybody in different ways. Well, how did you get over towards valuation?
Yep. So we settled out this arbitration, and Dad said, I figured, okay, we're going to take the money and start up another project. Keep going. Dad said, no, I'm done. I'm retired.
I'm retired.
So I took a shot at it.
That might be the most enticing thing that everyone here has heard is someone in their early 30s decides to retire.
Oh, no. That was my dad. He was probably in his mid 60s at that time.
I met you, Paul, when that happened, the timing of that.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, retirement. Yeah, won't that be nice someday? But, so I took a shot at it. We had this crew. We had, this facility. We did all kinds of crazy stuff. We built all kinds of anything we could get our hands on that we could build. I tried to build. We built communication towers, fiberglass components. We built sewage tank, massive, 65-foot diameter floating lid for a sewage tank in Vancouver utility somewhere. And we built a 65-foot canoe.
Wow.
That was for Chinchon First Nation up the coast in Vancouver, on the coastal there. That was for an ecotourism thing. And that was a contract brought to us to do that. But ultimately, it just didn't pan out. By 2013, things were not changing. The business was not coming back. And so I had to exit. And my brother-in-law was an appraiser in the Kootenays here. It's sort of a mountain range over about a 3-4 hour drive from where I'm at now. And at the time, that was about a 7-8 hour drive from where I lived on the coast. So I had a friend who had a landscaping company in a city in a midpoint. So I worked landscaping with him, grunted my frustrations out doing landscaping while I was taking my courses for appraisal. And then I would, on weekends or occasionally I would commute over to the Kootenays there with Brad.
Sure.
And, he would train me a bit, and then I would do some work there. And then I'd come back to the shoe swap and do some desk work and do some landscaping and head back to the coast, about a 4 or 5 hour drive from there, and renovate our house, get it ready to sell, and so back and forth. I did this for several months, and then over about a year, we got our house sold and we moved up to the shoe shop, and I continued to, do more appraisal work, heading back and forth to the Kootenays with Brad, taking my courses. The courses were often in Calgary, which is about another, 5 hour drive from where we're at here. So it was a busy time. The miles I put on making that transition was insane, insanity. Just trying to make recover from all that, right?
Sure.
So that got me here into. Eventually, we decided to settle in the Vernon area, and I continued to work with Brad and the business. That was in So from 2013 was when I first got my, started taking my courses and doing some work, and that got me, established here. So that's almost, just a little over 10 years now.
Yes.
And so that's how I sort of, so it was a family thing, it's, kind of who you know, and that got me to where I am today, which, that is, the adventure continues,
Totally get it. So for you, when you had this opportunity, as many things do, they come through people that you know or some type of introduction. What was it like getting into the process of valuation of property, having been around boat construction? I mean, there's a lot of similarities between custom home building and custom yacht building. And here you are out there as a valuer of a non-moving asset as opposed to a floating one.
Yeah. I mean, sure. Like there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of on the yachts, anyways. You've got all the, domestic systems. So everything's just far more compact, and the construction process is a lot more sort of cumbersome, I guess is the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I can't say that you could be an expert in yacht building and go and build a house, or so. But get some basic understanding of construction materials, different types of woods, all the different types of piping. In the yacht, we dealt with the same poly B pipe issue that the home builders were dealing with. You were using this poly B piping, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, that stuff's falling apart. You got to switch. You got to start using this new stuff, PEX, and there's all kinds of other products coming on the market that people were trying to fill that gap. So so yeah, just the basic some basic information there helped maybe aid the field a little bit, but also the creating spreadsheets and analysis, project management, understanding all that sort of played a role as well. Being able to read drawings, AutoCAD drawings or printed, be able to understand, different views and elevation views, and just having your eyes on plans and whatnot sort of is relevant.
That completely makes sense. And what was your general, given that your initial early days assessment was around being a private investigator, here you are now doing research and investigation of real estate. Why did you stay around real estate and not go back to being a valuer of yachts?
Well, I mean, I went all in on the yacht thing, and I got that out of my system. So okay. I promised my wife I was not going back. Although, there's times this last couple of years where she might be wishing that she had pushed me to stick it out. But yeah, so yeah, there was always that private investigative side. They should have given me a license for it at the time. Paul, we've determined you are a private investigator. But so yeah, that investigative side, yeah, it started coming out when I had questions, right? Yes. I did not take it at face value, anything. If something didn't make sense when I was doing my analysis, and even in the basic form that I was doing it, I always tried to figure out more, so yeah, so that ultimately led me to George Dell.
Oh, say a little more. Not everyone knows who that is.
Okay, well, I'm assuming a lot of people know George Dell.
A lot of people know, but there's a third of our audience that does not know who you're speaking about.
Oh, okay. So, well, I mean, I can't tell you everything there is to know about George.
You don't have to tell us everything. Just give us a little highlight.
Yeah, but so George, is teaching appraisal more from a data analysis side. So he teaches his key course. He calls it Stat, Graphs, and Data Science. And he's got two basic courses, SGDS1 and SGDS2, and he offers those in person and online, and he's been doing that for several years. But so I got connected up with him. Brad knew I was sort of an inquiring mind, and he said, I think you, and he'd come across George's stuff, and he said, I think you might really appreciate this George Dell guy, so maybe check him out. And so I started checking him out. I signed up for his newsletter. I think that was in around 2019-ish or so. Mm-hmm. And I liked what I was hearing. He was asking the tough questions and sort of making statements, some of them kind of bold, that I had those similar questions and concerns that I, coming in this, without having sort of had a long history in it, like, Brad was good and he, taught me lots, but, I wasn't, I had to I sort of built up our market here. Brad was not working in this market. So I went to his market, learned that, did appraisals there. And then I sort of slowly transitioned and built up our local market, sort of working as best I could within the geographical competency issues, right? And having to do that, caused me to really have to figure some things out the hard way. And at the same time, brought up a lot of questions. So that's when I gravitated towards George Dell. I took, Brad and I were both signed up to go he had a course, I think it was early 2020, to go to Albuquerque, New Mexico. But that, the pandemic kicked in, so we couldn't go. We canceled it. But then I did eventually get to take one of his courses shortly thereafter. I enjoyed it. I took his, a year later, I took his second course, both of them online. And then shortly after, at that time, I had both of my sons working for me. One of them as an official, a signed up candidate, and the other one as, just an office sort of assistant doing data entry and, doing research for me and whatnot, office kind of work.
Yes.
And that was my other son. So I had Ross and Landon working for me, and Landon, was kind of a numbers guy. He likes crunching numbers. Really good with math. And I thought, you know what, you might like this. So we got him to take on this George's course, and I was super busy. Now we're starting to get into post-pandemic era.
Sure.
And the busy business is going nuts.
Yes.
We all know it was insane.
Yes.
So I desperately wanted to learn how to write code and do all the super uber cool things that George Dell and his community of asset analysts, which is, probably one of the main reasons for that anybody thinking about going that path and taking one of George's courses. It should be to get the course, to be able to understand and speak the same language. I mean appraisal language. I don't mean code language. Yes. And maybe learn some code, but become part of that community and understand what's going on with the tools we have at hand. What the transition that's going on in the market.
Yes.
For technology is, I don't know if a third of your audience doesn't know who George Dell is it that same third, or is it more that it's people that just do not understand the gravity of the technology that's changing?
I think it's, in fairness to them, Paul, I think it's a couplefold. One, there's a third that, they're just kind of, it's been slow now, of course, but generally they've just kind of been busy doing what's right in front of them. And, kind of like your experience when things got busy. I mean, what do? You take care of the work that's in front of you.
Yeah.
Well, that's the testament to them. But there's also a third of people who are either not in the profession, or they might be newer in the profession and they're just not yet exposed. So given that those are curious people, individuals that like to learn, individuals that like to solve problems, it's just like you, there was a period of time where you didn't know that existed, and then there was a period of time when you did. And that's been my sense based on the feedback of that kind of one third of our community to date.
Yeah, if you had to break it down into segments. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, obviously there is a number of people who get it and who are, following along and taking the steps to get ahead of that curve. And, my line of thinking is, I really would like to see, you probably wonder, why am I the Canadian? Why am I the first Canadian to be on your podcast? Like, what is a Canadian? What's your interest in the American appraisal industry? Well, okay, there's a reason for that. In Canada, there's two appraisal associations. There is the AIC, Appraisal Institute Canada.
Yes.
And, they're not related or, sort of owned by or part of the Appraisal Institute of the U.S., but, similar situation. And they did, start there. And then there's this scenario, CNAREA, Canadian National Association of Real Estate Appraisers, which is a newer and smaller association. And so the AIC, I've got some notes on this, and we could share this if anybody's interested on the history of this. But they, probably in the early 2000s era, they went off and left. They quit following USPAP. They created their own standard.
Yes.
Which they called QSPAP. And today it hardly resembles USPAP, other than the basic standard is, the baseline for appraisers and the general public to understand what is expected of an appraiser. So appraisers can, the USPAP and the QSPAP can help appraisers understand, what's expected of them, and the general public can also, understand what they should expect from an appraiser by following those guidelines. So because Scenaria follows USPAP and it's a smaller association, I didn't have a lot of, peer opportunity to interact with peers on discussions of
I see.
USPAP issues. So
yes.
That led me to sort of connecting up with some U.S. appraisal groups. And so, Facebook groups and online groups. And so I started sort of connecting with those.
Sure.
And man, I'm telling you, just a learning opportunity, big time. To some of those communities, yeah, they can get a little abrasive and a little repetitious, and but the opportunity to learn and to put out some suppositions, I would far rather have my peers call me an idiot than be sitting in front of a panel or a judge or somebody and say, "I'm saying you're an idiot," because they're probably not saying it in those exact words. So I was always, I got pretty interactive and I had a really good reception. They were generally, I wasn't sort of blown off for being Canadian.
Sure.
So it was a great opportunity to learn a lot about the appraisal industry. And, part of our Scenaria coursework is to understand the history of the U.S. appraisal and how USPAP came about, because that's you need to understand how USPAP came about to understand, the basis for it.
Yes.
So we're learning all about the, FIREA and, how it all came about, understanding those relationships. And so that's why I got so involved in the U.S. So and it was happening around the same time, getting involved with George Dell, getting involved in those appraisal groups, which I highly recommend to, any of my peers, or just get involved in a group, And so that's how I got to that point, right?
Yes.
And
sounds good. So what if, given what you've been associated with and what you've learned since you've gotten in the industry, and you've been a part of two, significant industries, one significantly larger than the other. But what is it that not only have you really learned and are you advancing, but what are you looking forward to over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I was actually just responding to a post. I had reposted one of George Dell's posts this morning on LinkedIn, and some other appraiser piped in about how they predicted, 10 years ago that the industry would be done in, or what do you say, 5 years ago. He said in 10 years, the industry will be done. And his comment was, and I think that's still going to be the case. And I said, well, I don't think so. It's just changing. It's changing fast.
Yes.
And it changes hard. And for quite a while, there's not all work is lender work, right? So
of course,
there's always going to be that avenue, but not everybody can just go do non-lender work. Some of us are going to have to make that transition. And for me, that was a lot of our work was lender work. We unfortunately, it was one of the issues with the yacht business was I learned maybe we shouldn't have had all our eggs in one basket, with one customer. That basically when that one customer took on both of our production slots. And so he had a bad day, we had a bad day. And I thought I'd learned my lesson, but I guess I didn't. I came to appraisal and think, I've got all these different lenders and these different AMCs, and I'm diversified. I guess I don't learn that quickly. So maybe you could pull one over on me. But anyway, so my response to this post was, well, I'm excited because there's been a lot of questions. Like I decided because of this, we've got the AVMs taking away a lot of the cookie cutter work, and that's been increasing, and they get more reliable and accurate. They take away more of that work. So several years ago, I decided that I needed to be focusing on the more complex properties, the more, and so through the peak of things, I was, when things are, and even still today, I end up with all the garbage that nobody else wants because I like to do that kind of work. I like to do that analysis. It's not the most profitable, but, in the face of, the cookie cutter work that was profitable kind of going away, well, I do believe that will begin, and it is already, it's becoming a larger composition of our work is more complex files.
Got it.
And so so to your question, like that opportunity with the technology coming in that we're implementing, and we're building a shiny dashboard. So I've had, Landon, like he learned the George Dell courses.
Sure.
You just, and then it's continued on building. So when I was busy, I was building stuff and doing stuff in Excel, and I was always trying to create new ways to analyze things and new and better spreadsheets and whatnot. So I just had him follow along with me and rebuild those tools in R. R is the programming language, R Studio, and a Shiny dashboard. You can look all these things up. Shiny is a package of tools that you can build your own dashboard. Yeah, it's kind of like Power BI. It's, it's just,
sure.
But there's pros and cons to each. Some of the packages are incredibly powerful. So we built up this dashboard, this analysis tool that we own, that nobody could take it away from us. We don't have to pay a monthly fee for it.
Yes.
It's all open source coding packages and the number of packages. So essentially we've got this analysis tool that can help us to do an appraiser, what I see as an appraiser developed value model.
Got it.
Essentially we have some AVM packages in there.
Yes.
Machine learning code and all that kind of stuff that an appraiser can use, can look at, can consider. You don't have to rely on them. There's a whole, that's a whole topic unto itself is, appraisers, interacting with AVMs, right? So, and that's something I think everybody should learn more about, should understand what an appraiser can and can't do under USPAP and just, ethics. But you probably want to start learning about these models and how they function. And so that's my idea, is that we get these, that all your data, all your analysis, you bring it in, you do sort of a more traditional, and I'm talking, do a scatter plot and linear trends and all that kind of stuff, which is stuff that most of us are doing now. A scatter plot shouldn't be new to anybody. So I'm excited because now I'm able to start resolving some of those nagging questions, right? Some of those questions that I couldn't, I couldn't answer with the tools I had before. I had to make a lot of assumptions. I had to, sort of hang my neck out sometimes. I had a hunch. I had some idea how things were going, but I just didn't have the tools. And now those tools are coming online really fast. And I'm not talking about the AVM side of it. I'm talking about other graphs and abilities to adjust all your data to a certain date. I do, I focus on sort of, anytime I get an opportunity to take on a retrospective assignment, I like those. I can adjust all my data to a set date.
Sure.
So I'm excited. I think that there's a lot for, appraisers to tools to become better appraisers and to be able to resolve some of those bias issue questions, all the different types of bias, including the hot topic of racial bias. Like if we can, prove through proper analysis, detailed analysis, that we did analyze all the comps, and we can show different neighborhoods and how they react. And we're not choosing neighborhoods based on race. We're choosing them based on, location, amenities, distance to amenities. You can get into all kinds of tools that can help to highlight those differences.
Yes, sir. Now that's very, very good points, and all of which continue to point towards a future that involves technology I think in so many ways, there's so many parallels between your experience in the boating industry, along with your dad's, and your time here in the appraisal profession from a home building standpoint to someone who is such a professional and an expert that they could literally see and design things in their mind and translate that into some amount of two-dimensional work that then gets built out in 3 dimensions and not at first be exposed or have to deal with something like CAD. And then to CAD coming into the industry, and it has revolutionized so many industries from a standpoint of design, quality control, functionality, integration of multiple trades, the reduction in production timeline, the reduction in cost of construction, and elimination of overruns for people to actually follow the plans as opposed to deviate from them. And then if you talked about the global competition that you had faced as a yacht builder first, I think you said in Taiwan and then in China, those type of influences that what started out as a local thing no longer is local, and to the point where you're literally dealing with clients from around the world. I mean, just a phenomenal set of exposures that you had at a young age, now getting to be part of the valuation profession for real estate, as opposed to on the construction side of boating and yachts. I mean, just such an interesting treasure trove of what you've touched on so far, Paul, and you got many years still ahead for you.
Yeah, you bet. We're just getting started, and so my goal is to build this dashboard and to have it open source and to essentially have it available to all appraisers to be able to do this kind of. I think all ships rise with the tide. I believe that to be true. I would like to help other appraisers take those steps. I understand the difficulty in building your own tools. And I think as a community, take George Della's courses, join the community, check it out. And I think that's a sort of a grassroots movement that is moving quickly.
Yes.
And I think that's where appraisers need to be. Like, there's just no question about it. I mean, there's guys that are established with their own really key expertise in specific markets, and they'll do okay, they'll do fine.
Oh, yeah.
But everybody there's something for everybody to benefit from.
Very much so.
And for those new guys coming in, I think there's going to be a correlation, a relationship change. Not every appraiser can be a university degreed data scientist.
Yes.
Like that can't go that way. That's just not sustainable. That's not affordable. So there needs to be this intermediary between, expert appraisers who know their market, who can train other appraisers about, the boots on the ground type of appraisal, and also for them to be able to transition and be that intermediary with their tools, with the data science, because there's a huge movement from, the GSEs and all this to be more scientific about things. And as we all know, there's science cannot answer all the questions about the human relationship with real estate. So, we need to have that interface, right?
Very much so.
That's why I'm excited about the future. Even though, and a couple of years ago, like, I was ready to walk. I mean, like by summer of the fall of 2022, I decided. I signed up with a nonprofit doing charitable work. Because the fees were getting so low, the decline rate, And I was like, if you want me to work for minimum wage, well, I'll go work for charity.
Yeah.
So I did that. But, in this, 1.5 year span of time, the technology is changing so rapidly, and I'm starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm excited again. So where I was, very discouraged, and even though, the volume of work and the fees are still low, I'm excited about the ability to take on more and more of those complex challenges more efficiently, more quickly, and get, and start becoming profitable again. So yeah,
that is fantastic. Well, Paul, I am absolutely thrilled to have the opportunity to hear your story. Not only the first Canadian, the first yachtsman. I mean, you name it. It's interesting stuff, to say the least. First person for the community of asset analysts. So many firsts on this one. I really appreciate you being part of this. First one who's been a part of it that has talked about it, I should say. I know several other of our podcast guests over the last seasons are part of that amazing community as well. But Paul, I just want to again say thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for putting up with me. Hey.
It's a Canadian love, Paul. What can I tell you? It's Canadian love.
Yeah, right on.
All right. Right on. Good stuff. Well, everyone, just as I mentioned, make sure to like the podcast. Make sure to capture some thoughts for yourself. There are a lot of powerful learnings, especially from a business standpoint, that Paul touched on through his experience working with his dad in the boat and yacht business, many of which are quite applicable today and will be. There are lifelong lessons no matter what industry you're in. And of course, feel free to check out any of the resources that Paul mentioned, or just reach out to him directly. As he said, Paul, what you reminded me of when you shared that was the African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I really acknowledge and appreciate so many people that have that same outlook, and thank them for being part of our podcast to share that belief. So with that, we're bringing this one to a close. Thanks for liking the podcast. Thanks for sharing it. And until the next episode, go make the most of this time, as Paul touched on. Even if you're not as busy as you want to be in the valuation space, that doesn't mean you can't have an impact in other people's lives. So we appreciate Paul, and we appreciate you. With that, we thank you all. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Pa Zing's Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing professional paths and achievements of our beloved guests. Before we go, please subscribe on your listening channel, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. After you drop a comment below, who is one friend and peer you can generously share this episode with? If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Pa Zing's Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.